Okay, chill. I know some of you are probably butthurt and annoyed about the title of this video, but of course I don't really mean it. There's a reason that there is a long-held tradition of building wargaming runes in a certain style. And I'm sure you know the style I'm talking about, right? Corner pieces that are mostly like smooth foam core with some windows cut out. They're sort of modern, sort of gothic. This style of terrain is everywhere. You know, tournament tables are full of them, and every store probably has a shelf full of them as well. And really, there's nothing wrong with that style. It's simple and it works. But if I'm being honest, I never liked it personally. I did want to build some runes for one-page rules. And of course, my brain at first went to that typical corner foam core style rune, but like, meh. That would be boring to make, and it would probably be boring for you to watch. So I set out on a mission to build some terrain that was functionally the same, with a little bit of originality. I had another motive for building these, testing out some new foam. Getting hard foam in different thicknesses can sometimes be tough in North America, especially in parts in the US where a lot of you live. I can't say much yet, but I'm working on a way to get a selection of better foam available for hobbyists. But I need to do my due diligence and make sure the foam I'm sourcing is a good fit for us. I found a supplier of XPS in nice thick formats. The one issue with this foam, which is the same for most foam, is that it takes impressions much better on one face than the other. These sides take impressions really well, whereas the end grains kind of bounce back quite a bit. So I took some of these big blocks, cut them to a maximum size that I could get vertically under my hot wires arm, and started slicing a bunch of 1/2-inch thick strips to use as walls. I pondered the layout and assembly style for quite a while. I really wanted to avoid that ubiquitous triangle corner. But at the same time, corner structures make for the most useful designs in game. I couldn't come up with any sort of groundbreaking format, so instead shifted to making the style, the aesthetic interesting. I started by texturing both sides of all my foam wall sections with some stone. And I was happy to see that this foam was taking texture really well. It's pretty comparable to the Styroder stuff from Germany, which is basically the gold standard of crafting foam. This stuff's definitely a bit better than the pink Foamular or the blue Dow stuff that I can get locally. I was left with a bunch of well-textured wall sections, but just gluing them together and cutting out some windows would put me exactly where I didn't want to be with this project. I needed something special to spice it up. Eventually I found some windows with a really cool design that was about as far away from the typical Warhammer grim dark gothic style that I could find. They had this wonderful pattern that was kind of Moroccan, maybe Middle Eastern, and I decided that that would be a really cool way to go with these. Rather than making runes inspired by the grand cathedrals of Europe, why not take some inspiration from ancient mosques or just general architecture from more southeastern parts of Europe that border Asia? The architecture of places like Turkey seem to be a really untapped resource when it comes to building terrain. Once I was satisfied with how detailed and damaged the wall sections were, it was a simple matter of gluing the corners together and adding some damaged floor sections to give the piece some strength and to give it some higher spots to put minis on. Now, one thing I don't like about making corner sections this way is the joint between the walls. It doesn't look great. I wanted to cover it with something more massive and monolithic looking. So I took a sheet of foam and ripped it at strips with a 45-degree angle. This would allow me to make an outer corner pillar that looked like it was one big solid chunk, but without actually taking up space on the interior of the building. You see how that big corner section doesn't actually go inside here? Much better. But before I continue building these, I want to take a second to talk about this week's sponsor, One Page Rules. Now, One Page Rules are known for making wargaming accessible. They produce approachable games with simple to understand rules, and they offer a variety of miniatures that you can print at home for these and other games. These minis come in a variety of styles that can be used for all sorts of games, either for tabletop RPGs or as proxies in your favorite wargame. The January update is Beastmen and Eternal Dynasty. Beastmen are a great set of gnoll-like warriors that are perfect for Dungeons and Dragons or various skirmish games like Frostgrave. It was the Eternal Dynasty models that really got my attention though. Such a cool mix of futuristic and historic. These could be aliens of a future species in a distant galaxy or ancient warriors in a fantasy setting, but like with guns. I really love the armor on this set, and the mixture of styles and influence is exactly the same thing I'm trying to achieve while building these ruins. The models all come pre-supported and can be obtained through the One Page Rules Patreon. I'll put a link in the description below so you can check them out for yourself. Much like that very cool samurai-inspired armor on those minis, I wanted these buildings to have some extra flair. I found these border strip things, and they were friggin' perfect to dress up that little strip of foam that I had already placed. Kind of tricky to glue, but I got lucky. The pattern had tiny holes that were perfect for push pins, and it lined up with the interior floor pieces on the other side so I could just drive those pins all the way through and leave them in place. I was really into the vibe of this piece, so I took some extra time to carve out more damage and give the structure a bit more of a layered look. This was finished off with a small bit of sand and cork rubble. I didn't go overboard with this because I find that too much sand and rubble can be pretty annoying when trying to place miniatures on a surface. I primed it black with my airbrush because Canadian Tire has been out of my favorite spray primer for weeks. Although I really don't like using up a lot of this Vallejo airbrush primer on big terrain pieces. The texture looked awesome with some white highlights, and honestly, just like this would make very serviceable concrete, but I didn't want these to look like they were made of concrete. They had a bunch of unique architectural features, and I wanted the material and the colors to complement that. I saw these more as existing in a desert or coastal setting, made from a more clay-like stone, but with some colorful embellishments. I grabbed a few inks and got to work trying to paint out different sections in different colors. This was kind of tricky because I didn't want it to look like the structure was this color all the way through. I wanted it to look like the surface had been painted or tinted with some sort of plaster, like just on the top face, meaning I had to actively avoid coloring all the broken areas. I knew that I would be finishing this paint job with a bit of a brown filter, so there was some room for error, and I could go really wild with the colors, knowing that they would be heavily muted during the next step. I gotta admit that I had a little bit of panic and instant regret after putting on these colors. I thought maybe I had ruined the whole thing and I would need to reprime it and start over again. But I stuck with my gut and applied that brown filter. This is really the magic ingredient to make it all work. It made the broken areas look like the building was made of rich earthen clay. And it really brought the colors down to a place where it kept some variety and made things interesting, but without it looking like a funhouse circus tent. I actually liked it so much after that I decided to not do any washes, which is a rare choice for me. I wanted it all to look more dry and dusty and not have a bunch of water stains. So for a finishing touch, I instead just did a dry brushing all over with a medium khaki type color. And this again was one final decision that was a little bit out of the norm. I didn't use white, I didn't use off-white or vanilla or light gray, but instead I used a pretty heavily tinted beige, and it worked great. It made it look like that dry earth and stone was chipping through the paint. I'm honestly thrilled with the results of this project. I got myself a really unique set of ruins to add to my collection that I can use in basically any setting I want. But more importantly, I had a goal of taking what is arguably the most built hobby project ever and making a version that was somewhat unique. I think I hit this goal pretty well. Not only is the set stylistically different from what you usually see, I made a lot of decisions that were very different than my usual comfort zone. And whenever I do that and it turns out this well, I consider it a huge success. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button, let me know in the comment section below. Of course, if you want to pick up some tools or supplies and support the channel in the process, you can do your hobby shopping through blackmagicraft.ca. You can also support this channel by joining the Black Magic Craft Patreon. I'd love to have you as the newest member of the Black Magic Craft Fellowship. Last, I'm super excited to let you know that I am knee-deep in developing my own skirmish game called Idols of Torment. It's gonna be good, and if you want some more info, put a link in the video description where you can check out the trailer and sign up for updates. But yeah, that's it, that's all. Cool set of runes. I like them.